Warning labels on social media platforms like those on cigarette boxes. This is what the U.S. Surgeon General is urging Congress to implement. Coming up today on Business Matters. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here with me. Let's talk about markets first. Wall Street's main indexes closed higher today as investors awaited economic data and comments from Federal Reserve officials for more clarity on monetary policy. So the Fed will be able to cut its benchmark interest rate once this year, Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker said earlier, and that is if his economic forecast plays out. As well, GameStop shares today tumbled 12% after CEO Ryan Cohen says the video game retailer plans to operate a smaller network of stores. And this is part of the company's effort to try to boost sales and profit. All right, let's talk about Nvidia today. The Supreme Court has decided to take up a case involving high-flying chipmaker Nvidia, and the case actually dates back to 2018 when Nvidia's chips became popular for mining cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, for example. Now, a Sweden-based investor claimed Nvidia falsely downplayed how much of its sales went into the volatile crypto industry, and the investor saying that this misled investors and violated a U.S. securities law. Nvidia appealed the case, and now the Supreme Court will hear it, although we don't know the exact date just yet. Now, do you think there should be warning labels on social media apps? Well, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy says these labels worked on tobacco. He says they can also help teens. So here's the story.
Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, America's top doctor, wants to slap warning labels on social media apps. He says social media significantly harms teen mental health, and it's a national emergency. Murphy told the Today Show many parents don't even know the risks.
A doubling of risk of anxiety and depression symptoms, and the average amount of use per day among adolescents is nearly 5 hours. So that's deeply concerning to me.
He says a warning label would help them understand.
Sleeplessness, irritability. You can also have issues with kids as far as their attention span, and social media in general just causes problems with young minds.
Tech expert Burton Kelso is the father of 2 teens, and he agrees warning labels should be put on social media apps. Kelso also agrees with Murthy's suggestions, like banning social media until at least after middle school, and phone-free zones in the house, especially in the bedroom. Kelso says parents also need to monitor their children's online activities.
There isn't any decent parental control app that you can install, like, say, a smartphone monitor that's going to allow parents to look and see what's going on with social media accounts. Parents need to get the username and password.
The Surgeon General also wants Congress to pass laws banning apps from collecting children's data and restricting features like notifications, autoplay, and infinite scroll. He also wants companies to make public all the health-related data associated with social media use.
Now, it's worth mentioning that actually kids advocacy group Fair Play told NTD social media today is like tobacco decades ago. The business model depends on addiction. They say the Surgeon General's warning would be a critical step toward helping children. Okay, now let's talk about YouTube. And for that, video is meeting text here in a new feature being tested out by the platform. The Alphabet-owned video sharing site will be adding notes to some of its videos. So what I'm talking about here is that in the initial testing phase, the company said it's going to invite certain users and creators to write notes. And these notes are intended to provide, quote, relevant, timely, and easy to understand context on videos. An example for this could be, when a song is intended to be a parody, for example, or if there's a new version of a product being reviewed. And the feature will initially be available on the mobile app in the US in English. Now, people all around the globe are concerned about the use of artificial intelligence in news production. This is according to a report by Reuters. NTD's Sean Marshall takes it to the street to see what the people in New York are saying.
A new study has found most U.S. and U.K. residents do not trust AI-produced journalism, according to a report by the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. This comes as newsrooms globally are working to address a new challenge with generative artificial intelligence, as tech giants and startups like Google and OpenAI build tools that can offer summaries of information. The report surveyed nearly 100,000 people across 47 countries, found that consumers are suspicious about the use of AI to create news content, particularly for sensitive subjects such as politics. We asked some people in New York City about their thoughts and concerns.
Accuracy, and yes, accuracy would be my main concern of information, because I'm looking for information that's accurate, up to date, and is true, and from reputable sources. So that would be my concern, yes.
According to the survey, 52% of U.S. respondents and 63% of U.K. respondents said they would be uncomfortable with news produced mostly with AI. I asked people what they thought about news entirely produced by AI without human oversight.
I think my first initial reaction would be to question it. I think that it's just a lot to put a lot of trust into. I don't know if humans are totally ready to make that jump yet, especially when it comes to information that they get to inform their viewpoints. So my first initial gut reaction would be to be a little bit skeptical of it.
I also wanted to hear if people thought if humans are essential to journalism production.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there's some things that AI will be good for, but the human side of talking, I don't think we should lose that concept at all.
In terms of AI-generated content overall, the survey shows people are more acceptable with AI-generated illustrations or stylized graphics and animations, but they are strongly opposed to the use of AI for creating realistic-looking photographs and especially video, even if disclosed. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Also happening today, the IRS announcing it is closing a major tax loophole that could raise $50 billion over a decade. So the loophole is called basis shifting transactions. So in them, complex business partnerships move money from one property to another to maximize tax deductions and minimize their tax liability. So the IRS will now be on the lookout for these kinds of transactions that have no substantial business purpose, simply other than to reap a tax benefit. Okay, now we got a number of China's related stories for you today. First off, shares for sportswear brand Adidas falling today, and this is coming after the German company announced an investigation into allegations of corruption in China. So Chinese state media Jiemian reported that local executives had been accused of embezzling millions of euros and taking kickbacks from advertising and celebrity agencies. So the accusations came from an unsigned letter from a whistleblower. So in a statement, Adidas said that in part Adidas takes allegations of possible compliance violations very seriously. At the same time, trouble in China's property sector. Its new home prices fall at the fastest rate in only 10 years. And not only that, property investment and property sales in China fell as well for the first 5 months of the year. And this is according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Now, prices of new homes in dozens of major Chinese cities were down 0.7% in May. This is actually the steepest month-to-month drop in nearly a decade. Meanwhile, property investment fell 10% year-on-year and home sales shrank 30.5%. Now, all this despite the state taking major steps to try to stabilize its crisis-hit property sector. So disruptions and job losses during the COVID-19 pandemic in China in part have left many Chinese citizens unwilling or unable to spend on homes. And this is, of course, sapping the Chinese economy of another major driver of business activity. Also, Beijing has launched a tit-for-tat anti-dumping investigation into imported pork from the European Union. And this is coming after Brussels announced hiking tariffs on EVs from China. Now, China's Ministry of Commerce said a preliminary inspection of pork and pig byproducts from the EU found enough evidence to launch a formal probe. This is a step that mainly appears to be aimed at Spain, the Netherlands, and Denmark. So any increase in import tariffs on pork could be costly to European pork producers because the EU is in fact the second biggest pork producer, and Spain is the top supplier of pork to China. Now, here's some numbers for you. The EU accounts for more than half of the roughly $6 billion worth of pork that China imported last year, according to customs data. And around a quarter of that was from Spain alone. Now, Beijing is trying to dissuade the EU from permanently adopting higher tariffs on EVs imported from China. Now, the question here is, if China does indeed impose tariffs on the EU, what kind of impact will it have? And is it going to hurt China as well? For the answer, possibly I spoke to Daniel Lacalle. He's a professor of global economics of IE Business School in Madrid. Here's what he said. All right, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me here again. So let's talk about this. China opening an anti-dumping investigation into imported pork. Mainly, I see that it's targeted at Spain, where you are based. I mean, let's just start from the beginning here. Is there going to be a material impact on Spain and whatever other countries that this measure is targeting?
Absolutely, it will. Yes. Increasing barriers to trade, increasing protectionism, increasing taxes, putting unnecessary regulatory burdens. All of those factors certainly hurt the economies. And you mentioned what will be the impact on Spain, Italy, Greece, Portugal. Obviously, those are economies that are not able to accept the luxury of trade barriers like, for example, I don't know, France or Germany may. I don't think that they can either because they're not growing. But for the economies that are still on the process of converging to the average of the large European Union economies, that is certainly a burden. And for Spain in particular, which has sort of endured the past years of rising taxes, rising regulatory burdens, rising political uncertainty, and managed to come out of that end a little bit better thanks to exports, that is a very, very dangerous impact, and it certainly is a negative.
And just one more question on this topic, and let's focus this question on China, its side here. Is this a double-edged sword, I wonder? Can you talk about that, imposing potentially pork import tariffs here? Is that going to hurt China as well?
Protectionism, no, any protectionist measure is negative on the country that imposes them. So it's bad for the European Union and it's bad for China. It's bad for both. The trade barriers and trade wars are always negative for the country that imposes those barriers. So think about this. If you look at the imports of pork and the consumption of pork in China, it's an absolutely integral part of the Chinese diet. In many cases, I have read even studies saying that the abrupt increase in pork prices in 2020, 2021 was an essential part of the slowdown of the Chinese economy. So placing trade barriers on pork imports and placing tariffs on pork imports is going to increase prices in China.
Daniel, I do see you talking a little bit about China on social media, and I think you can speak to this as well, and it is big news today. So China's new home prices falling at the fastest pace in nearly 10 years. Can you talk a little bit about that? What options do Chinese officials have at the moment?
Well, I think that it's going to be very, very difficult for them to accept it. But Chinese officials need to understand that they have only one way of addressing the largest real estate bubble in recent history. It's larger than the real estate bubble of Sweden, of Spain, of the United States, of the UK in relative terms. So the burst of the real estate bubble in China needs to see deflation in prices. There is only one way in which you can deal with it, which is by actually making homes significantly more affordable for Chinese citizens in order to absorb part of that excess of building, which has been absolutely staggering. Now, if Chinese officials, in order to combat deflation, decide to implement measures to keep prices elevated or unaffordable for the majority of people, then two things happen. And we have seen it in Spain, we have seen it in Sweden, we have seen it in Iceland. Two things happen. One is that the excess of supply of homes is not reduced. Second is that the economy enters into weakness regardless. If they try to bring home prices up, that is not going to work. It never works. The only way in which you deal with it is the way that the United States, you will need foreclosures, you will need to see write-offs of real estate portfolios in the banking sector. All of those things need to happen. So you need to have, let's say, the reckoning moment of lower home prices, and then maybe you start to recover.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
So quite a number of China-related stories happening today, and we just have a couple more. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has trimmed its stake in China's biggest electric vehicle maker. So Berkshire recently sold over 1 million shares of BYD for nearly $40 million. This is according to a filing with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Now, the firm started investing in the Shenzhen-based BYD in 2008, which now in hindsight turned out to be extremely lucrative as the EV market in China exploded. Since then, though, Berkshire has offloaded about half of its holdings through sales in the last 2 years. So Berkshire's late vice chairman, Charlie Munger, actually pushed to invest in BYD. Now, at the same time, China appears to be way ahead of the US, and that when it comes to nuclear power. This is according to a study by the research group, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. It found that the US is as many as 15 years behind China in developing high-tech nuclear power. The industry in China has benefited from sustained state support and far lower loans than Western economies. So it appears that China intends to build 150 new nuclear reactors between 2020 and 2035. And by the way, with 27 under construction, and the average construction timeline for each reactor is about 7 years, which is much faster compared to most other nations. All right, we're taking a break now, but coming up, the FTC sues Adobe, alleging that it is harming consumers by hiding termination fees in some of its subscription plans. And pet insurance policies for roughly 100,000 animals dropped, putting tens of thousands of pet owners in a predicament. That and more coming up after the break. And thank you very much for staying with us here. Let's go over some more headlines for today. We have a court date for the potential TikTok ban. A U.S. appeals court says it's going to hold oral arguments on September 16th, and the court wants to go over the legal challenges against the new law. The law that requires China's ByteDance to divest TikTok's U.S. assets by January 19th or otherwise face a ban. Tesla is suing a former supplier. The electric vehicle maker alleges Matthews International stole its trade secrets. It's related to Tesla's battery manufacturing process. Tesla also said Matthews shared the tech with competitors. Now, in a statement, Matthews called the lawsuit a tactic to bully Matthews and said it would defend the matter. Photoshop maker Adobe was sued by the U.S. government today, and the suit was filed by the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC claims that Adobe is harming customers by hiding termination fees in some of its subscription plans, and those fees can be as much as hundreds of dollars in some cases. The agency also claims that Adobe is making it difficult to cancel subscriptions. So customers have to go through numerous online pages to cancel, and when they try to call by phone, the calls often are disconnected. So 2 Adobe executives named defendants as well. Responding to the lawsuit, Adobe says it refutes the FTC's claims in court. Subscriptions accounted for nearly $5 billion, or 95% of Adobe's revenue in the last quarter. Nationwide Insurance is dropping pet insurance policies for roughly 100,000 animals. The company blames higher veterinary costs and other factors. So the move puts tens of thousands of pet owners in a tough spot here because a lot of the animals losing coverage are older and have pre-existing conditions. So that means they may not be insurable elsewhere. Nationwide said it didn't cancel policies because of pets' age or claims histories. According to USA Today, it appears the cancellations may be based in part on where the pet owners live. In a letter to one policyholder, Nationwide said the type of policy the customer had would no longer be available in their state. Some customers are trying to organize as well to potentially take legal action. Now let's talk about movies. The big box office question this weekend was not which movie would debut #1, but would it be the biggest opening of the year? Well, the answer seems like, well, easily. We have the early estimates on the top 5 films in theaters.
You have 5 seconds before the door is sealed.
$3.7 million put The Watchers at number 5. The Garfield movie went from 2nd to 4th, taking in $5 million. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes moved up to 3rd place with $5.2 million. It's at $158 million domestic. Bad Boys Ride or Die slipped to 2nd, but $33 million gave the action flick $112 million domestic in just 10 days.
You make Riley happy. Sadness makes her sad. Fear protects her from the scary stuff she can see, and my job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see.
A huge debut for Inside Out 2. The animated sequel opened with $155 million, the best box office debut since Barbie last July.
And also worth mentioning here for Inside Out 2, it had the 2nd best opening weekend of any Pixar movie ever, trailing only behind 2018's Incredibles 2. All right, and that's all the stories we have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any feedback for the episode, please feel free to let me know. You can email us at business@ntd.com or leave a comment online. I do read them. And as I always say, business matters. See you tomorrow.